There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the fear of choosing wrong becomes heavier than the choice itself. It's that quiet paralysis that creeps in when you stand at a crossroads and your mind whispers, "What if I ruin everything?" Perhaps you felt it too, the tightening in the chest, the endless mental loops, the desperate desire for certainty before taking even the smallest step. We crave guarantees in a world built on mystery, and yet the irony is that our greatest growth rarely happens in the safety of knowing. It blooms in the trembling space of uncertainty. For a long time I believed that life was a test, that every decision had a right and wrong answer, like an exam where the universe graded me on wisdom I had yet to earn. I thought I had to get it right every time. And in that perfectionism disguised as prudence, I forgot that existence itself is not an exam, but an exploration. Then I encountered the teachings of Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, whose words have echoed through generations for their blend of spiritual depth and practical compassion. Cayce once suggested something that shifted my entire perception of error, that the soul never truly makes a mistake. It only creates experiences necessary for its remembering. Imagine that for a moment. What if what we call a mistake is not a deviation from the path, but the very terrain that teaches us to walk with wisdom? Cayce described life as a school for the soul, not a punishment, not a maze of right and wrong turns, but a living classroom where every event, every stumble, every regret is a teacher dressed in disguise. According to him, even our errors are guided by a divine intelligence that uses imperfection as the raw material for awakening. That means your greatest wrong turn might actually be the invisible doorway through which your soul evolves. Think about a painter creating a masterpiece. At first there are rough strokes, smudges, moments when the colors clash or the lines seem off. But each imperfection forces the artist to adjust, to see differently, to respond more skillfully. Without those so-called mistakes, the painting would remain static, lifeless. The beauty emerges through correction, not before it. In the same way, our lives are living canvases, and our missteps are not stains. They are brushstrokes that reveal new shades of truth we couldn't have discovered otherwise. Cayce's perspective invites us to stop asking, "What if I choose wrong?" and start asking, "What is my soul trying to learn through this choice?" Because from the soul's point of view, there is no wasted experience. Even the decisions that lead us into pain, loss, or regret serve a sacred function. They strip away illusions. They humble the ego that wants control. They bring us face to face with the tender truth that we are not here to be flawless, but to be conscious. And consciousness, Cayce said, is the measure of evolution. But fear, that quiet, persuasive voice, will tell you otherwise. It will whisper that you must always have certainty before moving, that safety lies in perfect foresight. Yet if you look closely, fear is not the guardian of wisdom. It's the echo of mistrust. It's the mind's refusal to believe that life itself is on your side. When we are afraid to decide, we are in truth afraid to participate in our own becoming. The soul longs to move, to create, to experience, but fear builds walls around that longing and calls it prudence. Here is where Cayce's revelation becomes medicine. He reminded us that spirit is not fragile. You cannot ruin what is eternal. You can delay your peace, yes, but even delay becomes a form of learning. The soul has infinite patience with itself. It doesn't label its past as failure. It harvests it as wisdom. Imagine if we lived this way, if we approached each choice not as a test to pass, but as a conversation with destiny. The fear of mistakes would dissolve into curiosity. Regret would soften into gratitude. And every so-called wrong turn would be honored as the perfect mistake, the divine choreography that brings you closer to remembering who you are. So when you stand before a decision, whether small or life-changing, remember this. You are not walking on a tightrope stretched between success and failure. You are walking on sacred ground, and even if you stumble, the earth beneath you knows how to hold you. The soul doesn't learn by avoiding experience. It learns by immersing in it, by touching both the light and the shadow until it understands they are made of the same source. There's a beautiful line attributed to Cayce that lingers in my mind. Every soul is on the path of its own making, and no step is ever wasted. Maybe that's what the perfect mistake really means. not an error made flawless, but an error that fulfills its purpose in awakening understanding. A misstep that becomes sacred because it opens the heart wider than success ever could. And when you begin to see your life through that lens, something profound happens. The tension eases. The mind stops demanding guarantees, and the heart starts trusting the journey. You realize that guidance isn't something you find out there. It's something you attune to within, through listening, through feeling, through forgiving yourself enough to keep walking even when the path ahead is uncertain. The moment you stop fearing the wrong decision, you rediscover the quiet truth that has always been waiting beneath the noise, that the soul cannot fail at being itself. The idea that the soul cannot fail seems beautiful in theory, but when we're in the middle of confusion, heartbreak, or loss, it feels almost impossible to believe. It's easy to accept divine order when things are flowing smoothly. But when life collapses around us, when we choose someone who betrays us, take a path that leads to emptiness, or lose everything we thought defined us, we start to wonder whether any higher intelligence is truly at work. This is where Edgar Cayce's teaching becomes not just comforting, but revolutionary. He never denied the pain of human experience. He simply placed it in a larger frame. He taught that what we call failure is often the soul's language for correction, a redirection of energy toward alignment with truth. It's like sailing on a vast ocean. Sometimes we move swiftly with the wind at our back, and sometimes a storm comes to change our course. We curse the storm, forgetting that without it we might have drifted endlessly in the wrong direction. Cayce's readings often emphasize that even suffering carries sacred intent. He called it the teacher of wisdom. Pain, he said, is not punishment. It is the signal that the soul is ready to see what it could not see before. And once we begin to look at our experiences this way, we no longer resist them with bitterness. We begin to listen to them with curiosity. When I first tried to live by this principle, I noticed how much of my fear came from the illusion of control. I wanted life to obey my plans. I wanted clarity before commitment, reassurance before risk. But life, in its strange mercy, doesn't operate by those rules. It asks for faith before evidence, courage before certainty. It whispers, trust that you are guided even when you can't see the map. That whisper, that gentle insistence to move even without guarantees, is the voice of the soul. The ego waits for proof. The soul responds to calling. There's a moment in every journey where you must step into the unknown, not because you have all the answers, but because the weight of staying the same has become unbearable. Maybe that's what Cayce meant when he said, the spirit grows through application, not through knowledge. We can read every sacred book, analyze every choice endlessly, and still remain unchanged. Growth begins only when we act, when we risk being wrong for the sake of being real. Think about a seed buried underground. In the darkness, it has no evidence that light exists. Yet something in it knows how to move upward. It breaks apart, literally destroys its own form, to reach for something it has never seen. That's what our so-called mistakes do. They break the shell of who we were so we can reach toward who we are meant to become. Without that breaking, there is no becoming. The perfect mistake of the soul, then, is not an error at all. It is the sacred fracture through which light enters. But how do we live this truth practically? How do we face the daily uncertainty of decisions without being paralyzed by fear? The answer, I believe, lies in shifting from judgment to observation. When you remove the labels good and bad from your experiences, what remains is simply learning. Each moment becomes a mirror reflecting back the state of your awareness. You no longer ask, did I do it right? But rather, what is this showing me about myself? That single change in perspective transforms regret into revelation. Cayce once said that thoughts are things, not metaphors, but literal forces shaping our experience. If our thoughts are seeds, then fear is the weed that chokes them before they bloom. When we believe we can make irreparable mistakes, we close ourselves off from the flow of divine guidance that is constantly trying to reach us. We tune our inner frequency to guilt, and guilt only echoes back confusion. But when we hold even our pain as purposeful, we realign with the vibration of trust. And in that vibration, clarity begins to emerge naturally. It's important to understand that Cayce did not promote blind optimism. He never said that every choice leads to happiness. What he offered was subtler and far more powerful, the assurance that every choice, even the painful ones, can lead to understanding, if we allow it. The universe, he believed, is not punitive but corrective. Its aim is not to reward or punish us, but to restore us to harmony with our own divine essence. From this view, every challenge becomes a call to return to balance, and every disappointment becomes an opportunity to remember what truly matters. Imagine for a moment your life as a great symphony. There are moments of harmony and moments of dissonance. When a note sounds wrong, the composer doesn't destroy the song, they listen, they adjust, they weave the discord into something richer. Our choices, even the discordant ones, contribute to the fullness of that music. Sometimes what sounds like chaos in the middle of the piece becomes the very tension that makes the resolution so beautiful. So perhaps your wrong decision is just a note that hasn't yet found its place in the melody of your becoming. If we could look at our lives from the soul's altitude, the way Cayce described it, we would see that every experience has been orchestrated for our awakening. The betrayal that shattered your trust taught you discernment. The failure that broke your pride opened you to humility. The loneliness that once seemed unbearable taught you to love without condition. Each of these moments, though painful, was perfect in its timing. The soul doesn't see loss, it sees preparation. It knows that sometimes the garden must be cleared before new seeds can take root. And so, the perfect mistake becomes not something to be avoided, but something to be honored. Because it is through our missteps that we come to recognize the inner compass that never stops guiding us, even when we ignore it. The more we listen, the more we realize that life has never truly been against us. It has always been for us, shaping us gently, sometimes through grace and sometimes through fire, but always toward remembering. The truth is, every decision we make is sacred, because it reveals something about who we are becoming. There are no wasted steps, only steps that take longer to understand. Perhaps that is why the soul is never in a hurry. It knows that even when we wander, we are still on the way home. The longer I've walked with this understanding, the more I've realized that the universe doesn't measure our lives by success or failure. It measures them by expansion. Growth is not about getting everything right. It's about becoming more conscious, more compassionate, more aware of the sacred thread that weaves through all our experiences. Edgar Cayce often emphasized that mind is the builder. Our external lives are shaped by the thoughts we nurture within, and every event we encounter reflects the architecture of our inner world. When we approach our decisions from fear, we build walls. When we approach them from trust, we build doors. But trust, as simple as it sounds, is not passive. It's not the lazy hope that things will work out. It's an act of spiritual courage, the decision to stay open even when we are uncertain. It's the willingness to believe that the unseen intelligence guiding the galaxies also guides the details of our daily lives. Cayce's readings often describe this divine intelligence as the creative forces, a living current of consciousness that moves through everything, responding to our intentions and emotions like water responding to the shape of a riverbed. When we act from fear, we constrict the flow. When we act from love, the current carries us forward with ease. To trust this flow is to recognize that our mistakes are not interruptions in the divine order, but expressions of it. Think of the ocean waves. They advance, they retreat, they crash against the shore, and yet every movement contributes to the rhythm of the tide. In the same way, your soul's progress is not linear. It moves in spirals, forward, inward, backward, upward, learning, remembering, forgetting, and awakening again. What seems like regression is often the deepening of understanding, the refining of purpose. That is why Cayce encouraged patience with oneself. He said, "In the patience ye become aware of thy soul." And that awareness is not intellectual, it's experiential. It comes when you stop fighting the unfolding of your own story. There is a deep peace that arises when you realize that every version of you, even the ones you judge, has served the journey. The angry you, the lost you, the fearful you, each played a part in shaping the awareness that now watches with compassion. What if your soul doesn't want you to erase your past but to bless it? What if enlightenment is not about escaping imperfection, but about embracing it as part of the divine tapestry? Cayce believed that the soul's purpose in every lifetime was simple: to express love through whatever form the present experience allows. Sometimes love expresses as forgiveness, sometimes as courage, sometimes as surrender. And the situations that most challenge us are precisely those that stretch our capacity to love. When we make a wrong decision and face its consequences, we are given the chance to practice that love, toward ourselves first and then toward others. Without the friction of imperfection, compassion would remain an abstract idea. It is through our own pain that we learn how to cradle the pain of others. There's a profound humility that emerges when we stop running from our mistakes and start learning from them. Humility, in the language of the soul, is not self-rejection. It's the quiet recognition that we are participants in something vast, mysterious, and intelligent beyond measure. It's the surrender that says, I don't need to understand everything to trust that it has meaning. In that surrender, our resistance dissolves, and we begin to see how the perfect mistake is often the turning point, the moment when the ego cracks enough for light to pour through. I once heard someone describe the soul's evolution as a spiral staircase lit by a single candle. You can only see a few steps ahead, the rest remains in shadow. Yet as you climb, the higher you go, the more light the candle casts. That's what life is like. Every choice, even the ones that seem insignificant, adds a little more light to the next step. You don't need to see the whole path to move forward, only to trust the step you're on. And in that trust, the next one reveals itself. This is where the fear of making wrong decisions begins to lose its grip. Because once you understand that there are no wasted steps, you stop demanding certainty before movement. You stop needing to get it right and start focusing on being real. You begin to listen not for guarantees, but for resonance, that subtle vibration in the heart that whispers, "This feels true for now." That is how the soul speaks, not in thunder, not in logic, but in quiet knowing. Cayce used to say that the Spirit of Truth speaks to all who listen. Yet few of us truly listen, because listening requires stillness, and stillness terrifies the ego. The mind wants to analyze, to plan, to control. But the soul communicates through silence, through intuition, through that mysterious alignment that makes you feel both peaceful and alive. When you move from that place, mistakes lose their meaning, because even if the outcome surprises you, you know the movement itself was honest. And honesty, not perfection, is what aligns you with your highest path. I think that's why Cayce never separated spirituality from daily life. He saw the divine not in temples or rituals, but in how we choose, how we love, how we respond. Each moment of uncertainty is an invitation to bring consciousness into the ordinary. Washing dishes, ending relationships, starting new ones, taking risks, forgiving ourselves, these are the real altars of transformation. When you approach them with awareness, the sacred reveals itself in the mundane. So when you look back at your so-called mistakes, instead of asking, "Why did I do that?" ask, "What did that teach me about love?" Because love, as Cayce understood it, is the essence of all spiritual growth. Every path, every philosophy, every revelation leads back to that single truth. We are here to remember how to love ourselves, each other, and the divine intelligence that animates all things. And sometimes love needs the contrast of error to recognize its own depth. Maybe that's what the perfect mistake really is, the point where the soul pauses, breathes, and says, "Ah, now I understand." It's the moment when the pain of the lesson transforms into wisdom, when what once felt like punishment begins to feel like preparation. And from that awareness, something softens inside us. We stop trying to control the story, and we start participating in it with reverence. Because ultimately, the fear of being wrong is the fear of being human. And yet, it is our humanness, our fragility, our confusion, our longing that makes us divine. And so when you finally stop running from the possibility of being wrong, something extraordinary begins to happen. You start to feel the quiet pulse of freedom, that lightness that comes from realizing you were never meant to live perfectly. You were meant to live fully. You start to see how every twist and detour has been gently carving depth into your being. What once felt like punishment now feels like poetry, a design too intricate for the mind to grasp, yet too intimate for the heart to deny. The universe, you realize, has never been judging you. It has been shaping you. There's a quiet miracle in this realization. When you no longer see your life as a sequence of right and wrong choices, you begin to perceive it as a sacred dialogue between your evolving soul and the intelligence that birthed you. Cayce's words echo here with renewed clarity. Every experience is an opportunity to express God in your own way. That doesn't mean every choice is painless or pleasant. It means every choice, when met with awareness, becomes a vessel for grace. Even the moments that broke you have secretly been the moments that built you. To live from this awareness is to live without resistance. Not the kind of surrender that gives up, but the kind that opens up, like a flower unfolding to the sun. You stop demanding that life makes sense, and instead you allow life to make meaning. You start noticing how the very situations that once felt like obstacles now serve as gateways to deeper presence. The heartbreak that closed your heart becomes the key that unlocks compassion. The failure that bruised your pride becomes the teacher that whispers humility. The detour you cursed becomes the route that led you home. The perfect mistake is no longer a phrase, it becomes a way of seeing. And when you begin to see this way, your relationship with decision-making changes entirely. You no longer chase certainty, because you understand that clarity grows from movement, not before it. You realize that the universe cannot guide a ship that refuses to sail. So you move, not recklessly, but faithfully, trusting that if you drift, the currents of life will always bring you back. The fear that once haunted your choices starts to fade, replaced by a deeper rhythm, a quiet confidence that says, "Whatever happens, I will learn. Whatever unfolds, I will grow." Cayce often spoke of soul memory, the idea that deep within us lies the knowing of who we truly are, eternal, creative, divine. Every lifetime, every experience is simply an opportunity to remember that truth. When we see life through this lens, the urgency to avoid error dissolves, because we understand that every experience, no matter how painful, is temporary, while the wisdom it births is eternal. The soul is never diminished by experience. It is refined by it. There's an ancient wisdom that says the pearl is formed when the oyster is wounded. The irritation of the grain of sand becomes the birthplace of beauty. Without the wound, there would be no pearl. Without our mistakes, there would be no depth, no softness, no compassion. Perhaps that is why the soul, in its infinite patience, does not fear pain, because it knows that pain is simply transformation in disguise. The mind resists, the soul receives. And when you begin to live from the soul's perspective, even your regrets begin to shimmer with purpose. Sometimes I imagine the soul as a great weaver. Each thread of joy and sorrow, each moment of clarity and confusion, is woven together into a pattern too vast for us to see from within the loom. Only when we rise to a higher vantage point, through reflection, forgiveness, and acceptance, do we begin to glimpse the design, and then we realize there were no wasted colors. Even the darkest threads have been essential in revealing the light. This understanding doesn't erase pain, but it redeems it. It doesn't excuse our mistakes, but it sanctifies them. It turns life from a series of tests into a living prayer. You begin to walk differently, softer, slower, more aware. You start to speak with more kindness because you understand how fragile the human heart is. You listen more deeply because you've learned how wisdom hides in silence. You forgive more easily because you see yourself in everyone else. That is the real fruit of awakening, not the absence of error, but the presence of love. When Cayce said, "You are not bodies with souls, you are souls with bodies," he was pointing to this truth, that our essence is untouched by our human drama. The soul doesn't keep score, it keeps learning. It knows that one lifetime is a single chapter in a book too vast to close. It knows that the perfect mistake of today might be the seed of enlightenment in another season. So instead of fearing the next decision, we can approach it with reverence. Each choice becomes a chance to align, to create, to express the divine spark within us in a new way. And when you truly live this way, when you stop demanding perfection and start trusting purpose, something shifts in the energy of your life. The world around you begins to respond differently. Doors open where before there were walls. Opportunities arise where you once saw endings. People come into your life not by coincidence, but by resonance. You realize that alignment is not about controlling outcomes, but about harmonizing your inner state with truth. When you are in that harmony, even the detours become sacred. So if you find yourself standing before a choice today, uncertain, afraid, torn between paths, remember this: there is no path that can take you away from your soul. There are only paths that reveal it in different ways. Some through joy, some through challenge, some through the gentle light of success, others through the cleansing fire of loss. But all of them, without exception, lead you closer to remembrance. Perhaps the question was never, "What if I choose wrong?" but rather, "What if every choice is a part of my becoming?" And in that question lies peace, the peace of knowing that life is not happening to you, but through you. So breathe, step forward, trust the quiet wisdom that beats beneath your fear. The soul's compass does not fail, it simply guides in whispers, not shouts. And every time you dare to follow it, even imperfectly, you honor the sacred dance of creation itself. Because maybe, just maybe, the perfect mistake was never a mistake at all, but the universe's most beautiful way of saying, "You are ready now."